Well, once again, we are here, Stephen Daniel, and I'm beginning to wonder, can we have two good days in West Indies Test cricket? They won. Yes, we would have liked to have seen New Zealand score fewer runs, but let's be real. Um, Teams are not just going to roll over and play dead, even if you're, giving it your best shot. A 231 all out early on the second day. That first day, I would say West Indies could have been fairly satisfied, especially with that inexperienced attack. Day two, all New Zealand, all New Zealand. And we're looking at the prospect of a game that will not go 5 days.
Unfortunately, well, thanks for having me again, Philip. Unfortunately, you are spot on. Um, it doesn't take a genius to know where things went wrong. It's the batting. So if we take a quick look at the batting cards from tonight, we're not looking at a whole historical perspective, but just last night, um, we had two players who scored over 15 runs. Let me repeat that. Two players who scored over 15 runs.
Over
If you
15 runs, you said.
over 15,
Okay, I thought you said 50 at first because that would have been
we
accurate as
had two
well.
players who scored over 15
Yes,
runs,
yes, yes, yes. Point
right?
taken, yes. Uh-huh.
So if you're an international side and you expect, production from let's say 1 through 7, and only two have scored over 15, and the other two have scored 50s, very good 50s, I would say, you kind of have shot yourselves in the foot already. So the expectations going forward for the rest of the game can't be very high because, again, I looked at a number of stats going back, I think, at 2020, and in all the games at Christchurch, the team that has led on first innings has won the game. So following that pattern is not a causation, but it's likely that the pattern will be followed. We're behind the 8 ball. And I guess the question is, based on performance yesterday, could we and should we have expected better? And I think if we look at the some of the dismissals, for example, I was very, very, very proud of how Paul performed. He was very unlucky to get out to that shot. He was at that point getting into this groove, and that shot that he played with that Conway took that unbelievable catch. I think he was very, very unfortunate, but he played a masterful test, and he was slow. We know he's generally slow, but his role at that point in time was building a foundation for the team because he was losing wickets, and I thought he did a good job. The rest of the players unfortunately didn't come to the market to the market, and we lost uh, whatever momentum we might have had when we lost both Chase and Graves for Ducks. So I don't think we should expect too much in terms of a positive outcome for the series for this match, and it's all down to poor batsmanship and very, very good bowling by the New Zealand attack. And I know there has been a lot of talk about the pace, but if you look at the performance of the New Zealand bowlers, there's only one person who was really pacey. That was Duffy. He was consistently over 135. But the other bowlers were very metronomic. They kept the ball in a spot, and they moved it around a bit. And unfortunately, our players weren't able to deal with that consistency. And we've seen the consequences.
Well, you mentioned two players scoring about 15 runs. Had Shanda Paul been caught, but the first opportunity that went to Conway, he would have been one of those who didn't make it to 15 either. I don't
Right.
say that to take away from his performance at all, but just to maybe even strengthen your concern about players just not doing the bare minimum. And you're quite right. I mean, had you had even two or three other guys scoring 20 or 30, you could very well have reached that 231 and you would now have a second innings game. As it is now, you're playing catch up. None of this surprises me because if you've been
Mhm.
listening to me over time, you would realize that my expectations, I have to admit, are not very high. And
Right.
that's because I know who we're putting out there and I know who are the performers out there. And I get great amusement in reading some of the chats and so on. I now see someone the other day was talking about someone putting Dorn in I wanted to see Dorn in the West and decided to virtually blaming Sammy on that account. And now he
Mhm.
sees one wants to fast track Dorn into the Barbados side. So the thing about it is that as supporters, I don't think that we really understand the game enough to even criticize those people who are making the decisions because if you haven't worked out yet that what our friend Terry Ennis calls the best phenomenon. I don't know if you know that story, but it's all
Mhm.
about throwing a guy in the water, and if he survives, he gets a swim certificate.
Yeah, Lorenzo Best, yes.
I don't know how often how much longer we think that's going to work, but that will work from time to time in special situations. But that's
Mhm.
not a template for success. And clearly, those on the sideline, criticizing those who are making the decisions, don't recognize that. And fortunately, those who make the decisions are not pressured into being that silly.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think with the pool of players that we have to choose
Mm,
from,
yeah,
I can't really say that. I remember, I'm just a fan.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I can't say that there are players that come to mind anyway, in
Mhm,
my mind, that would
mhm,
have made a significant difference in the outcome and the performance from last night. I mean,
mhm,
you may think of a couple players, for example, somebody might be arguing Hodge should have been there. He was in my side. But would
mhm.
Hodge have made a significant difference if he played instead of
Well,
any
Hollis
man?
played a number of test matches. He's had some good
Yes.
moments, but he's averaging
Yes.
29, I think it is.
Yes,
About the
exactly.
same as all the others.
Exactly.
About
So really and truly, if you get into arguing about player A versus player B,
Mhm,
we aren't really moving ahead in terms of really solving the problem. Our batsmanship overall is poor. And until we can improve the batsmanship, whether we play in India and Bangladesh on spinning tracks, or we play in New Zealand and England where the ball moves around a bit more, or we play in Australia where it's bouncy and South Africa, the same thing.
mhm,
Unless we can have players who can handle varying conditions
mhm,
and do well, not just survive,
mhm.
then it's going to be the same old repeat cycle.
Yeah, and that's why the best phenomenon is not going to work. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Now, Chanda Paul has scored a fair amount of runs at the regional level. I don't think he's one of these players that you could say was gifted an opportunity to play. Chanda Paul has been around for a couple of seasons for sure, and has done well at the regional level.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And he, we know he can bat long, and we know he's a fighter. But they've obviously studied Chanda Paul, and he's not played 100 test matches. He's not a Craig Brathwaite, so it means they would have looked for the footage and they would have studied him. And those catches I talked about were both in the same area,
Mm-hmm.
like slip like gully. They clearly were bowled into a plan. And in the end, he got caught not too far from there, maybe a slightly. And bear in mind that that's not the first time he was dismissed in the manner in which he was dismissed on day two. So what I'm saying is that they've obviously studied Chandapal. And a player, therefore, who in our regional competition would bat for hours and score runs.
Mm-hmm.
And when he goes up to the higher level, he will be tested because the technology nowadays allows for that. So this is why it is ridiculous, and I make no apologies for saying that. For us to continually talk about putting a Joshua Dorn in because he scored some runs at youth level, or put this person in, and it was silly to my mind to put Michael Louis to play
Mm-hmm.
in England on the strength of 2 centuries or 2 or 3 centuries in a regional competition when the guy had never done anything before, right? So what I'm saying is, what we need, and you know where I'm going with this, you've heard me
Mm-hmm.
often enough with my effective high performance thing. We've got to work
The
on the
Mr.
guys
HPC.
technique. I know I use the word effective because
Yeah,
some would argue that we already have it, but it's not effective because clearly you've got players who are doing the same thing now that were doing 5 years ago. So it can be effective.
right.
Okay.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
until we get that right, where we can get a guy who has a particular problem to be able to deal with that problem, you can keep throwing in new players just because you get bored seeing the same fellas getting out. So you'll just be seeing a new set of guys going in and getting out because they'll be studied and their weaknesses, and we all have them. Okay, the
Mhm.
weaknesses will be found out, and they'll be sorted out. So changing the team and swapping this and bringing in this new player, that's not the answer.
Doesn't
The
solve the
answer
problem.
is in
Doesn't solve the
developing
problem.
the talent throughout the region so that when guys get to that level, they can handle themselves and they can be assisted in making any necessary tweaks that are required to survive. Final thoughts before we wrap up as you look forward to day three?
I look forward to day three. You know, the perennial optimist. So I hope we can grab some wickets. And of course, the biggest challenge is going to be that fourth inning to see how we perform. But fingers crossed. And I'll be watching and hoping that our boys do well.
For a moment, I thought you were going to say that you'll be watching and hoping that the rain falls. But
No, we're the big boys, so you got to be able to take your lashes if they come and hopefully learn and get better.
a good note on which to end. Thanks
All
again,
right.
Stephen.
Thanks for having me, Philip.